Okay, this is the Chimera exercise. We're going to import our file from Thingiverse or equivalent. This is the class exercise in which we take found files and we mash them together into a new creature. So here is my first file. I am going to pan the image by holding the center wheel and dragging. I can zoom in with the mouse wheel, and I can pivot by clicking and holding the right mouse button, like that. Now, if it's not pivoting where you want it to pivot, and it's swinging out kind of in a crazy way, you can hit C to recenter, and then it will pivot around what you had the mouse over when you hit C, which is very useful. The first thing I'm going to do when I open this file, besides make you all seasick with me swinging everything around, is I'm going to go to Analysis, which is right here. And this is going to show me potential problems with the file. There's lots of possible things here that are very useful, but Inspector is the most basic. And what it's telling me is that we have some disconnected shells. So if I told it to auto repair all, what it's going to do is it's going to simply delete those shells. Notice that we're now missing the flame of the torch. We don't want to do that. Control-Z will get us back. So we need to deal with that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go to Edit, and I'm going to separate shells. And what that's going to do is it's going to take all the different lonely pieces that are not connected, and it's going to make a new object for them. So I can turn off the statue itself, and now you can see that there is a floating flame, and also I can center on this little piece of chain down here. I said center on the little piece of chain. There we go. And you can see that there are these chain links that are not actually part of the structure. So we're going to get our statue back. Oops. Here's the visibility option here. I'm going to start with the flame. And if I zoom in here, center on it with C, click and drag to rotate. Oops, too close, sorry. It actually looks like it is touching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the statue here, identifying it by turning on and off the visibility. Flame here. I'm going to hold Shift and click, so now they're both selected. And when that happens, it opens up this menu here. And there's a number of things I can do, but what I want to do is Boolean union. And what that's going to do is it's going to add the two shells. And notice that this icon has a gap in there. Instead of just adding them together and leaving the shell intact, it's going to delete the shell that is part of the overlap. If I just hit combine, it will put the two of them together as the same object. So these are separate objects. But that's what we had when we started with. If you remember, there was one file, there was one object, and then I split the shell so that we could see the different pieces. So I'm going to do Boolean union. And it's got a bunch of different options here. And the one that I want you to pay attention to is precise is good. Search depth is a little more complicated than I want to talk right now. But auto reduce result can be dangerous, and we'll talk about that in a second. But for now, I'm just going to hit accept. And oh, unknown fatal error has occurred in the tool, so it's not going to do that now. So there was some issue involved with this, and my guess is that these two, even though they look like they're touching, they're not actually touching. When you do 3D modeling in something like Maya, you can create things that have your shells that share a plane, which is all fine and good for animation. But when you're trying to create something in the real world, you come across this issue where if they're sharing that plane, they're not actually overlapping, and so the Boolean math doesn't know what to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select only the flame. I'm going to go to my T transform tool, so I press T, and I'm just going to nudge this down a smidge. Not enough to lose anything, but now when I hit accept, and I select this here, now when I hit Boolean union, see how it didn't disappear on me? So I think we're in good shape. Auto reduce result, if I come in here, and I hit W for wireframe, this is showing the actual triangles that we're working with here. These triangles make up the faces. So we have faces, we have vertices, and we have edges. And where the two meet may or may not actually have the triangles in the right place. So what the software does is that it adds triangles until it can find a good intersection. And so what you might wind up with is, in a complicated overlap, you might end up with a whole lot of triangles afterwards. And auto-reduce results will erase those for you after the process. But what sometimes happens is that in the process of getting rid of the excess triangles, it morphs your shape. So I'm going to hit accept here. And in this particular case, we didn't get extras. We didn't need to erase any of that, and so that's fine. But I am going to pan out, and we're going to now look at the other issues we had here. So I suspect I'm going to have a similar issue with these, because you'll notice those chain links are floating. And if we want this to be all one solid object, we are going to need to fix that. So I'm going to select the one closest here. So I'm going to select that. I'm just going to rotate it a little bit until it is just touching the two shells. I'm going to do the same to this one. T for transform. It allows me to move it down a little bit, allows me to rotate it a little bit. And this, of course, how you go about getting the two of them to touch a little bit is up to you. I kind of feel like when a chain is laying on the ground, it doesn't float like that anyway. So this is just fine for me. I'll accept that change. One last one over here, so we're going to center on that. Right-click and drag to rotate, mouse wheel in. And now I'm going to T for transform. Oops, I have the wrong one selected here. We want that one. All right, T for transform. Give it a quick rotate. And maybe on the other axis. Right-click, drag for swing around. Give it a little bit of a nudge there, a little bit of a nudge there, and just when we start to kind of come in here. All right, so we're going to accept that transformation. And now I'm going to select this one and the whole statue. So both of these, shift-click, now they're both selected. Look at this flat plane right here. These triangles were generated in a way that they were trying to have as few triangles as possible here. But notice that in some of these areas where they overlap, the gaps are different. So to get them to link up, they're going to have to add some of these gaps. So we're going to go to Boolean Union. We're going to take Auto Reduce off. We're going to accept this. And notice that in the wireframe, these are now, this is a field of closer to equilateral triangles so that it matches the faces that we have here so that the edges meet up. So I'm going to accept that. And so we have that put together. There might be a little bit of distortion in this chain in that process, but nothing I'm too concerned about for this model. If you want it to be cleaner, you can add more faces, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so I'm going to repeat this with the other two. So I'm going to pan over here. I'm going to select this one, shift-click with that one, and we don't have a Boolean Union. Why not? Or it could be because I didn't have the visibility on. Okay, now that the visibility is on, we have Boolean Union. That's something to watch out for. I'm going to click on Boolean Union, just like we did on the last one, and I'm going to go ahead and accept this here. But I'm going to leave Auto Reduce Result on and see, oops, leave it on, and we'll see what it might do. So notice we have these like really weird distortions here, and that's why Auto Reduce is a little dangerous. If you want to reduce the mesh afterwards, I would recommend doing that in a way that you can select them, and we'll go over that too. So Control or Command Z is your friend, undo that. Keep in mind that Meshmixer has a very fine granularity in undo. So each tool change, each click, you can undo with Control or Command Z. If you want to undo the larger picture, so you do a whole bunch of clicks and then hit accept, and you want to undo the entire thing, that is Control left arrow, and that can be found in the shortcuts menu under Help. If you go Help and Keyboard Shortcuts, you'll get a PDF that is incredibly helpful. I recommend printing that out and having it stuck to the wall behind your computer or wherever is handy, or on the pile on your desk, as it is in my case. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this with Auto Reduce off, and now it's going to leave it in with all of that. We're still getting a little bit of distortion, but like I said, for this particular part, I'm not super concerned. I just want these things to exist. If this was a more important detail, I would do what I'm about to do for the next one, and I will show you that now. So I'm going to select this body here. I'm going to go to Select. I'm going to select All, which is Control or Command A, and we are going to remesh. And the remesh mode, relative density is fine. The different options here depend on your intentions. So relative density basically will just add a bunch of triangles. For every triangle, it will split them up. For adaptive density, it will adapt according to need. So you will end up with larger triangles in big flat planes where you don't need as much, and you'll get finer triangles where the details are. But because what I'm trying to do is to keep it all even, I'm going to stick with relative, and we are going to do, you know what, I'm just going to leave it as the default. Oh, except it did nothing. So we're going to try that again. And we are going to, oh, that was what I did. So now I can drag the density around, and you can see that we're getting more triangles. And I'm hoping that what this does is that now when we hit accept, and I go to my Boolean Union, instead of warping this and making it kind of chunky, as it tried to make those triangles fit, see how it kind of distorted the section of the chain? It still gets a little bit of distortion, but since the triangles are smaller, the distortion is smaller. So that's one thing when you're working with this. If you find yourself struggling with this kind of weird artifacting, that's one solution, and that's the remesh tool. So I'm going to accept that, and we now should have all one object for Miss Liberty here. And ultimately, I'm pretty happy with the level of detail here. I don't think I can bring it down very far without losing what I want. So I'm going to call this good. I'm going to go to the inspection now, analysis, one more time, inspector. I have one little flaw somewhere in here. I'm going to try and auto repair all, see if it breaks anything. It doesn't seem to. I'm going to hit W to take the wireframe off so I can see my mesh again. And yeah, I'm satisfied with that. Notice these are different colors. This is surface groups or mesh groups, and this is an incredibly powerful tool in this. Even though it's in the same file, I can select these as different groups now. If I wanted to select that piece of chain separately, even though it is all one piece within the mesh, I could still simply select that as part of the group. And so it's handy to keep those separate or keep them in groups if you have intentions on working with them later. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit done, and then I'm going to save it. So save as. Notice I've already got a Liberty put together. The reason why you want to save this is because Meshmixer isn't 100% stable. While it's really good at taking care of things and working with files that are otherwise broken, things that have overlaps, things that can't exist in the real world, those things can also cause crashes. So you notice that when I had that one file that wasn't connected and I tried to weld them even though they weren't touching, it gave me an error saying, we're canceling this operation. Sometimes it tries to do that anyway, and it crashes, and you lose your progress. So always save. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my next one. So I'm going to import. This is an interesting set of questions. Append or replace. If you want to just bring in the new file and stack it on top of this one immediately, you want to append. If you want to start fresh and get rid of your previous model, you can hit replace. I'm going to go ahead and hit replace for now because I am not wanting to tax my computer too much while I'm recording, so I'm going to go to Undead Spider and hit open. This mesh is a little more complicated. So whoever made this was pretty ambitious. I'm going to go to wireframe and zoom in, and you can see there's lots and lots and lots and lots of tiny little triangles. So my computer's going to blow up if I try to do too much of this without a little bit of reduction. So first thing I'm going to do is, I could process this, but just keep in mind that when you see this level of detail, things are going to be a lot slower. And in this particular model, because I don't have any sharp edges or really fine detail, I can get away with it. So I'm going to go to select, Control A to select all. You can also do that in one of these options. And now what I'm going to do is reduce. So you can also do this in remesh, but reduce gives you some interesting options here. And notice that it's thinking about it. This is a relatively heavy processing. So you have a couple of different options here. Every time I click on them, it's going to reprocess, so I'm not going to show you all of them right off the bat. But generally, reduce by percentage. We want to preserve the shape that we have. We can change the percentage. There's no reason you can't do this in batches. So I'm going to accept this first reduction. And now we've got it significantly smaller, and I can do it again. So I'm going to reduce it again. And you'll notice that this, well, it comes up a little faster, and you can see the triangles are a little bigger. I can accept that. And one more time, reduce, and faster still, larger still. If I take wireframe off, you can see it's a touch more cartoony, but the overall effect is just as creepy. Well, not quite as creepy as the original, but honestly, I don't know if I want it as creepy as the original. This thing is pretty creepy. So it's good to know how to maintain the level of detail that you want, but also know that if you're 3D printing, there's no way to get that level of detail anyway, so you're not hurting anything by reducing that a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to get rid of this base. And I'm going to get rid of the base with an edit in the side menu here, and I'm going to do a plane cut. This is a super handy tool. If you have a model that has an uneven base and you want to 3D print it so that it stands up, you can basically just slice the bottom off of it so that it's flat. Or if you've got something that's too large for your printer, you could, instead of discarding half, you could keep both. Slice groups would chop it in half without filling in the space in between, which there are reasons for, but not particular for what we're doing here. And then the fill type, remeshed fill is probably a good option for this. Minimal fill, you'll wind up with those triangles that go all the way across, which isn't a great way to work with things. If you want to modify it later, then you're going to be up against those really long triangles that tend to distort things funny. No fill will leave you with a non-watertight model, and I don't remember what fixed fill is, so you can play with that if you want, but remeshed fill is going to work for what we want. And I'm just going to bring this down until it just slices off the base. Oops. And I just made that crooked. So you'll see, notice that I'm at fine granularity. I can move every click of this tool rather than undoing the entire thing. I'm going to pivot around. Yeah, that's pretty flat. I'm going to blame that on the base here, not that being crooked. I'm going to bring that up until it just fills that in. It's a little bit of a high spot there, but that's okay. And we're going to accept that. And oh, I didn't come up high enough. So we still have this like really thin surface here. So we're going to do another one, plane cut. And right there ought to do it. There we go. So now we just have the legs. And notice that they have flat ends on them. Okay. So for this model, I have remeshed it so that it is a much smaller set. And now what I'm going to do is delete the parts that I'm not interested in adding to the model. So we're going to go to Select. And there's two main ways to select. You can draw a loop around it. And I'm going to just hit delete here. Notice that leaves an open shell. And you can also use the brush. So if I just mouse over this, you can see that circle. If I click and drag, it paints my selection. and then I can hit delete and work with that. And then what's super useful is there's a number of things you can do. I'm going to use the left and right brackets to change the size. So if I want to get some fine detail, I can come in here like that. And then, if that's not quite enough and I want to just sort of sneak the selection more, oops, I just used the trackpad. Let's undo that. Do that. There we go. I can where it says modify, I can expand or contract the ring using the less than and greater than tool. So that is Control or Command, depending on whether you're Mac or PC, Shift and greater than expands it, lesser than contracts it. This is really handy when you're trying to do precision work, because you could just select the tips and then sort of have it creep along and then adjust where you want. So I'm going to delete that. And you don't necessarily need to hit delete. There are other options, and I'll show you that on the next. Model. So I'm going to get rid of the abdomen here. Try not to get too far. And before I get too far, I'm going to go ahead and hit delete, and then I can see what's left. There's an option here that says allow back faces. Right now, if I click over here, notice that I'm not getting any selection. But if I allow back faces, I can paint. I click on that, and you'll see that it is selected on the other side. Since it's kind of tough to get in there, if I Control Shift greater than sign, I can sneak that out. And then I can also create crease and angle thresholds. And that, theoretically, I'm actually not super versed in this particular tool, should keep it from selecting past that joint here. So if I come in like this, notice that it's not I just pointed at the screen. It's not selecting this part here. It's only selecting that part over there. If I come over here, maybe you can see that as well. If I come under here and paint, whoa, that's not what I meant to do. Control C. Control C again. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. There, because I have that angle threshold on, it's only getting that face rather than creeping over this too much. It's doing it a little bit. So if I Control Shift minus sign, I can remove just a little bit of it, delete that, and life is good. Okay, so now I have these weird floaty pieces here. Go ahead and left bracket, make this smaller. I'm going to take my crease angle threshold off because it's causing weird things to happen. And that is selecting where I don't want it to select, so I'm going to undo that. S for select, or you can go to the select tool here. Now I'm just going to grab a bit in the corner, and because that's so tight, I'm going to just Control Shift bracket and get it that way. Again, right click, drag to pan, delete to get that. Delete, Control Shift greater than, and we're getting pretty close here. So, got most of the bits out that I don't want in my way for the next part. So right now, if I go to Analysis in Inspector, it's going to show me some stuff that's happening here. There's a few faces over here that were left over that I didn't properly delete that is freaking out. Red usually means really bad. We've got some blue, which is a simple hole, and then purple oftentimes means that it's an orphan piece or floating. So if I click on that, it should just delete it. I don't know what happens when I click this. Okay, so I was able to fill that. And I can just hit Auto Repair All now. So I have Flat Fill selected. So what it's trying to do is go straight across the opening. The other options are Minimal, which is similar to Flat Fill, but gives you as little as possible. Smooth Fill, it will project out to make a smooth contour from around the hole. In this particular case, it would make a very bulbous end to this, and that kind of defeats the purpose of what I was trying to do here. So I'm going to center and zoom in. And I'm not super thrilled with how chunky this is. So I'm going to hit Done for right now, and we're going to select. We're going to see if we can left bracket to make that smaller, and we're going to see if we can kind of clean this up a little bit. We're to the point now where it's just like one triangle at a time. All right, delete that. And hopefully our inspector will be able to deal with these. One thing that's useful is that you can expand. If you have an island like this, you can under Modify, right here, what this means is that you're modifying the selection as opposed to Edit, which means that you're editing what has been selected. And you can expand to Connected. And it will select everything as part of the island that you've taken. So delete that. We're going to hit it up with Analysis again, Inspector, and I'm going to hit Auto Repair while we're closer. And I'm more comfortable with that. Still not thrilled with this, but we're going to move on. All right, so now that I have that to where I want, Control-Shift-Save for Save As. We're going to call this Spider 1, because that goes with the theme of Liberty 1, and we're going to open up the next file. So we're going to import, append, and we want our loader. So I'm going to open that up. Oops, I appended rather than. And there it is. So I'm going to recenter around that. So if I hit analysis on this one, there's quite a bit going on here. And I could hit repair all here. But we're now losing a lot of details. All the teeth are missing from the bucket. We now have racing slicks rather than dirt tires. So Control Z, and we can see where all of those little bits and problems are. So what we're going to do is instead of doing that, we have two options. We could do the trick with the chain, where we oops, we have to select before we can do that. So I'm going to select this, edit. We can separate the shells and then Boolean add them all together. There's another option that can save you from major problems at the expense of perhaps accuracy, and that is make solid. So what make solid's going to do, besides make it look really goofy at first, imagine taking a shrink wrap and wrapping it all the way around the model, and then the computer brings it closer and closer to the model and completely rebuilds all the triangles around it. And why this is super handy is that it doesn't matter what's inside the model, it doesn't matter everything else. Theoretically, it will create a brand new object that is now a watertight solid rather than whatever mess of shells and meshes loosely connected that you may have had. So fast obviously isn't going to work for this. So I'm going to go accurate. This is relatively intense on processing, so they did this really nice thing where you can do all of your controls here and then hit update. So I'm going to kick the accuracy up. I'm going to kick the mesh density up. So this is how far or how close the shrink wrap has to be to the original meshes. And this is how many triangles are within the mesh. That makes it easier to fit everything in there. And another thing that's really valuable is offset distance. And if you've got models that are way too thin, or like I said, sort of like a series of loosely connected empty shells, this will swell them just a little bit, and that can help fill a bunch of gaps. So if you're struggling with that kind of thing, this is a quick way to take care of that. So I'm going to hit update, and it's going to think about it. Not exactly using a rocket sled of a laptop right here. And now it's looking much, much better. Not absolutely perfect. You can kind of see where some of the straight edges have been rounded over. You can do a sharp edge preserve, and that, if you have like an architectural model, might be a better choice. But that really uses a lot of processing power, so I'm not going to do that for the demo. But if you're fighting that, keeping these edges looking clean, that is an option. All right, so I'm going to accept that, and it's going to think about it again, and then I'm going to hit wireframe. We're going to see what we're looking at here. That's pretty intense. I don't think this model needs that many triangles. So what we're going to do, especially in these areas that are flat, you don't need a lot of triangles to represent something that's flat. This whole pane, if it's this even, really could only be, you could do that with 2 triangles if you wanted it to stay flat. So we're going to select all, Control or Command A, and then we're going to edit, and we're going to reduce, and it's got to think about it. This is how many triangles you have. That's a lot of triangles. And now we can see that it's bringing them down somewhat. I'm going to click and drag. See how without that it's having to redo it. That's one of the reasons why I like to do this in batches. Get it down to where it processes a little faster. We'll accept that and try it again. A little faster this time. Not as many triangles to fight. I'm happy with that. If we take wireframe off, you can see that the spirit of the whole thing is still intact. You can kind of see a little bit of softening in these joints, and that's one thing to watch out for. If that's a concern, instead of selecting all, you can do reducing or remeshing in just targeted areas. So if you look at your wireframe and you say, oh, well, this window right here, let's make that larger, bracket. Let's just remesh this area here. We'll leave the edges of transitions, but now let's just reduce this. And now we can start getting a little crazy with the controls, and you see how much faster it takes care of that. If I take off wireframe, you can kind of see where you start losing detail. But ultimately, I mean, I can reduce that to 85% before it starts really losing in this area because it's such a simple part of the model. It can be tempting to just leave as many triangles as possible, so you always have the best resolution. But the person that comes after you that has to work on the model might be kind of upset if you have, 50 megabytes worth of triangles that aren't necessary, because that's a fine way to set someone's computer on fire. Okay, so we're going to clear selection, and you can compare the wireframe on this side to the wireframe on this side. And you can see that this part alone is has much larger triangles. So I'm going to take that off, and all I want from this model is this back, the backhoe side of it, and the front loader bucket. So I'm going to start with, oh, you know what? This won't let me, I don't think, this won't let me delete and fill. I can delete it, but if I try to set it up so that it automatically fills on the inside, because it's got both sides to deal with, it won't handle that very well. So now I have some islands here, and this is where expand to connected is incredibly useful. So I can just hit E and delete, select E, delete, E, delete. Let's see what's connected here. That's the whole thing. All right. So we're going to clear that selection, and we're going to select a little bit more to isolate our parts. I'm going to recenter it to here. I'm going to reduce this, center with a C, and then reduce that with the left bracket. And I'm going to see if I can divide this thing up. Okay, delete. And another feature of the selection tool is you don't have to draw all the way around. If I just make a sweep, it's going to automatically, make it all the way around for me. Notice it selected that up there that I don't want. So I'm going to clear selection. Oh, it looks like I erased some of the bucket down there. I'm going to have to back up a little bit. My apologies. There we go. I did not mean to erase that. So if I hit Shift and click, it undoes it. So you can erase part of the selection with the Shift click. So now if I hit delete, we're in much better shape. And we're going to try this again. And now I'm not getting any of that bucket. All right. So click, drag, and the algorithm tries to guess what you're going for. And oftentimes it's pretty good at that. Okay. So this is getting pretty fine detail in here. There's a little gap there, so I can start using the expand trick. So again, that is Control Shift greater than, and sneak up on the parts I'm looking for. I could also try to use the crease angle threshold. So, oops, Z. Let's crank that up. I think the angles are a little too smooth on this one, so it's. I think I'm going to be better off. C for center. Now I can rotate around this. Yeah, it's working. It's kind of keeping me from getting past the crease there. See, it only does that part, and you can adjust where that falls. And get that in there, that in there, that in there. I'm going to make this a lot smaller. I'm going to Shift erase that. But while I'm here, I'm going to take care of some of this other stuff. Oops. I'd like to keep that piece, but get rid of this. Shift click to erase. Shift click to erase. I'm going to take a quick look and make sure don't have parts selected that I'd rather keep. And delete. All right. Now that looks a bit like a dog's breakfast. But if I've isolated them, I can use the expand to connected, and we can see if we now have islands, and it looks like we do. So that should speed that along, assuming that I can do that with all of them. Not quite. That's for select, and we will try and disconnect that from the rest of the piece. Oh, it's probably over here. Okay, delete that. Select. Oh, it's still connected. Okay, this might be a place where I can just select using S, and no, that's not it. Select. There we go. Delete. And some of this is fussy, and there's a lot of tools that you can kind of use, and there might have been better ways for me to go about this, but for the most part, it just kind of depends on what your model looks like. It's one of the reasons why they picked this kind of fiddly one. So, I can take Analysis, Inspector, and kind of take a look here. And if we just hit Go, see what we get away with here. Had a little trouble with this face right here, which is understandable, so we'll do a little bit of that by hand. And this did an interesting thing where it filled in all the way across. C for center, and then we can rotate around that. That may or may not be a problem, and we'll find out soon enough. You know what? It's going to be a problem. So I'm going to select. Hey now. Take that threshold off. So now it should wrap around when I hit Shift. I said Shift. There we go. Ah, I really did make a mess there. Alright, you know what? I'm just going to do this again. So clear selection, S to select. I'm going to draw a line from here to here. And it gave me something weird. So let's try that again. Clear selection, hit select, and there we go. Didn't select anything super weird, and hit delete, and now we have a much cleaner surface to work with. So if we go to Analysis, Inspector, and we tell it to correct those two openings, it should fill that up. Now that's flat fill. Let me show you smooth fill, and you can compare the two. Or you can't. Wow, that doesn't look much different. You can kind of see here where it bulges out. It tried to make that a smooth transition. All right. Let's see if we can correct this. Yeah, it doesn't like it so much. Ah, sorry. All right, we will clean this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, a small bracket, just take a little bit there, and rotate this around so we can see it. And then I'm going to expand it, Control-Shift, open bracket, and now we can get rid of it. Right-click, drag, sneak in there, expand, delete, check. That's looking much better. Yeah, having these sheet planes really confuses the computer because there's no place for it to fill. When it has an opening like this, it can just fill across it, but otherwise it doesn't quite know what to do with it. And that's unfortunate there, but I'm not going to put you through it. Okay. So back to analysis, back to inspector. That red is usually a sign that something's really bad. We'll see if we can deal with it. And again, not sure what the problem was. There's a glitch in the matrix, but generally speaking, everything is all sealed up and watertight. And we can save this. So we're going to call this loader 1. And now we are going to get rid of this. We've got our bits and pieces here, and we're going to import and append. We're going to bring in Liberty 1. So we've already fixed this one. Mouse wheel to zoom out. And we have a little bit of a scaling difference here. Oops, turn that on, close that. So let's select that. T for transform. We're going to make this bigger. So I'm clicking on the center square. You could click this square to scale it out this way. I'd like to keep it proportional. So I'm going to click the center square, expand, 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 and make that visible again so we can kind of get an idea of our scaling here. I could rotate, and I will later, but for now, I'm just going to bring this front in, and right about Right about there is what I want. All right, so I'm going to hit enter, say OK for that, and notice these looked kind of weird while I was expanding. That's just an artifact of something. But when I hit OK, it was ready to go. And now what I'm going to do is, you'll remember under Edit, I can separate shells. Now when I do that, I now have this one and this one I can work with. So what I'd like to do is move this one separately. So T for transform. I'm going to keep the scaling the same. I'm going to sneak that in there until it just kind of fills in. And now I'm going to use the rotate tool to kind of match the angle here. Center, C. Mouse wheel zoom. Right click drag. And that looks about like what I was looking for. Okay, I'm going to hit wireframe here. And what you're going to see is that these triangles here, meeting up with this one triangle here, this will not be able to do a Boolean add without subdividing this triangle. So just keep in mind that's what's happening when we do that. I'm going to center over here, and we'll pivot around. And similar things are going to happen here. So just keep that in mind as I do this. This might be, we'll see if that's a problem or not. I might need to correct a little bit of that. There might be too many directions happening at once there. All right, so I'm going to select that one. I'm going to select that one. And Boolean union. So think about it. And it added just heaps of triangles in there to make that happen. Notice it's red. Probably not going to be happy with that. There's a line here. So something's happening with my union where there's too many complicated parts coming together for it to process and match triangles. I could try to make some adjustments. But my guess is the problem is actually, I'm going to cancel that. My guess is the problem is actually in this place here. So I'm going to select this piece again. I'm going to transform. I'm going to do a little bit of surgery here. Center around that. Oops. We'll accept the transform. Now I can center around that. And we'll see what's going on here. I'm guessing that the problems are these little pointy flanges here. See how this is a different color? That is most likely what's known as a normal. There's a front face and the back face. So we have kind of a combination of front faces and back faces. And that is a common thing, as for select, to be problematic. I'm going to select this. I'm going to expand it. I'm going to erase it. Still have some weird triangles here, so I'm going to work around. Work around there. I'm going to do it again on this side here. So I'm going to select that, Control Shift greater than. I'm going to select the whole flange, and hopefully this will give us a little bit of a cleaner. Ooh, sorry. There we go. A little bit of a cleaner edge. There we go. Get this too. Like that. And again, analysis, inspector, and fill, and you know what? I'm going to cancel that. Control Z. Control Z. Instead of flat fill, we're going to try a smooth fill. Smooth fill. And that's better. See how it follows the contour? It's a little bulgier. There are times for each of them. Oh, doesn't want to do those. Auto repair all. Okay. Hit done. Oh, notice the stripy color when I was in there. Oh, right. There we go. We're inside the part right now. This is what the stripes are all about. So if you see these stripes, that means that it's the inside of the part, and that's pretty important. This is referred to. This is if you see this on what should be the outside of the part, you need to invert your normals. So just keep that in mind. All right, mouse wheel out. I'm going to go back to transform. We're going to move this back into here, and now we are going to try and Boolean this again. And it's not even giving us the choice. Why isn't it giving us the choice? Maybe because it's not. All right, we're going to select that again, transform, give it a nudge, see if that makes a difference. There we go. So something about the way it was intersecting, it wasn't happy. There we go. So notice we've got the two different colors here. Precise is fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit auto reduce result. So keep an eye on these details here, and we'll see what we get. Yeah, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to undo that, and we're going to take off auto reduce. There we go. That's better. We were getting some distortion in here. The crenellations on the base were pretty much toast, and so we should be better now. Okay, that one's connected. So shift click on that, Boolean union, refining, and that's looking pretty solid. Take off auto reduce, and there you go. Okay. For the next step, I'm going to take the base of the statue off. You have seen plane cut before, but I'm going to show it again because it is a darn fine tool and it is useful in many situations. So that's about where I want it there, and accept. So now I have a nice neat cut there. I'm going to take a quick look at our wireframe situation here. We have quite a bit of unnecessary triangles here. So I'm going to select. I'm going to paint some of this in. Edit, reduce, and we can kind of take a look here, and we should be able to, so you can see what it's actually doing here, the size of the triangles. If I take off wireframe, we'll be able to see what kind of damage we're doing. So that's clearly too far, but right about, oh, shape preserving. Let's bring our max deviation down. Oh, I see. There we go. So we could say we want it to be within 0.5 millimeter. And that is awful. How is that? Oh, our scale might be crazy. So what if we said that it's 1/10 of a millimeter? That's actually not bad. All right. And you'll notice that we are much smaller than we were from this side over here. So that's just kind of the thing that's good to do, so you're not waiting so long for all the processing power, especially if you have a lot of changes to make or you're going to be sending it to someone else. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Always save. Okay, and now we bring in Captain Spooky. We're going to append. We're going to select, we're going to transform, and we're going to scale up. Let's see how we're doing. Oh, it is 90 degrees off. So we're going to rotate. And a little smaller, maybe. Let's get, there we go. Now we're going to back up and just take a look at the whole thing and see how it all sits. Yeah, there's something terribly wrong with that. I like it. Okay, so we're going to accept that transform. We're going to attempt the Boolean union. And we have lots of issues. Imagine. Okay, so if we go for a union, goes like this, as we've been fighting, it will actually show you where the error is. And it's giving me an error for this particular set of corners. So this is the second crenellation in, the little pointy parts on the structure. So we're going to cancel this. We're going to turn off the spider so we can see this crenellation here. I'm going to select it, expand the selection, and I'm going to hit F. So delete and fill, smooth is fine, and we're going to see if that takes care of it. So we'll accept that. And select the spider again, turn on the visibility so that we can do a Boolean union, wait for it to join, and Bob is your uncle. And there we go. So we'll accept that union, and think about it, and now we have a single, clean, watertight image. We go to Analysis, Inspector, and oops, we have one defect. And there we go.